Okay, we're going to look at Unit 5.1. We are starting operations management, which will be the unit we are going to be working on sequentially from this point for a while. We're starting with operations management. It is under the Unit 5 module. The 5.1 slide show will be there. So if you need to get that going, please take a moment to pause and bring that up. All right, so operations management is a major in college. It sometimes falls under the supply chain management area. Sometimes it's operations on its own. Even logistics oftentimes will fall in this area as well. So let's get started. All right, today's objectives are to first analyze the role of operations management. So what happens? What is this? What do companies do in terms of operations management? Very, very basic, just talking through the process. And then we're going to really look at those pillars of sustainability. Those are in AO3. You will be doing a project on these when you get back, and we will be looking at these three pillars. If you are using sustainability as your scope, your conceptual lens for your internal assessment. This is really important to determine if you want to do all sustainability, if you want to pick bits and pieces. Additionally, it works for a lot of questions in general as well. So you may decide you want to change your conceptual lens if you feel like it works. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to think about operations. I always ask, think about the operations of the school. Think about what we do from start to finish and how it happens. So operations oftentimes people think are just goods producing businesses. However, we do want to understand that it is producing goods, but also producing services. And we'll talk a little bit about how that looks different. The definition for operations management is producing the right amount of goods and services in the right quantities, right quality level, in a cost-effective and timely manner, looking at efficiency. So we're really looking at, do we have the right amount of goods and services for our customers at their demand, what they want, but there's quality there. We really want to make sure we're looking at quality, all while making sure we're cost effective, but also efficient through that. A lot of lean operations and lean production comes out in this as well. So when we look at this objective of analyzing the role of operations management, we are looking at the difference between goods and services and how that works. So when you look at goods and services, we first are going to go into that value added model from Unit 1.1. They both can be talked through that model, just a little bit of differences happen. So I'm going to go to this next slide, and the value added model is this input output model that we studied the very first week of school last year. And so we look at our inputs and we look that we have inputs. Those are the resources a business uses in terms of how are we going to produce our good and service or service. So we have our human, which are our employees, our financial, which is money, and then any other resources that we use to create our final good and service, which are our physical. So for instance, at the school here, human resources are teachers, financial, money that we get typically from taxpayers since we're a public sector business. And then physical, you can look around the building and see desks and computers and whiteboards and TVs. Those are all part of the inputs of the service output of education. So the output then becomes our final good and service. In the middle is where that value added happens. So they're either the processes for services or the production for typically goods. So what we're doing in this model is we're turning inputs into something that is more usable for an end user where we can charge a higher price. And so when we go back the slide before this again, when you look at goods, you're looking at this model, but you're looking at that middle section as production processes, like production methods. We're going to look at different types of production. Like we're going to look at mass production. We're going to look at job production or custom production or batch production. We're going to look at different ways that businesses take their inputs, create them into a more usable product like secondary sector, and then output. In terms of services, we are looking at the processes the business has, timeliness. You think about wait times, you think about customer service, after sales care. I like to think a lot of the additional three Ps of marketing a service, the processes, the people that are there, the physical evidence, some of that comes into play. So walking through this model in terms of a goods producing business, I may have my inputs that are raw materials to create them into a usable product, and then the final product goes to customers as a good. In terms of services, however, we are looking at maybe more, still having the human, financial, and physical, but the physical would be more of the physical evidence or the things that the business has. The processes might be how quickly you get through the service, how efficient it was, how much wait time you had, and then your outputs. I think a lot of times if you think about how a restaurant operates, or if you think about how a hospital or an ER, how quickly you are through that process. Was there quality there? Was it seamless to make that service as efficient as possible? So that's where we look at the value added model for goods and services. All right, so let's get into sustainability. When we look at sustainability, again, this may be one of your conceptual lenses. You could actually pick all of sustainability, or you could pick one of the three or two of the three, whatever works best. Sustainability is different than steeple. Steeple is external. Steeple factors are those externalities that a business cannot control. And what makes this a little difficult is that the three sustainability pieces that we look at are going to have the same terms as our steeple factors. This is a very different model in the fact that we are not looking at externalities. However, we are looking at our business's sustainability in terms of these three things. So when we think about sustainability, you're truly thinking about longevity, making a business model that does not fail, that you are continuing your existence. And so when we look at sustainability, we can think of these three things. When I was younger and in college, it was a lot of economic sustainability. We used to say, what's the bottom line? When we say the bottom line, we used to say like the bottom line of our profit and loss. Like, where are we? Are we profiting? How much money have we made? So when you think of economic sustainability, it's the first one that typically comes to mind for students. If I say, what makes a sustainable business model? Oftentimes you hear money. The business has money. They're keeping their money in terms of growing their business. They're being efficient. They're respecting their budgets. They're making and profitable, making money and being profitable. In terms of social sustainability, that's really how we treat people as businesses. You're looking at both internal and external stakeholders. So, looking that it is sustainable as a business to treat people with respect, to treat your workers fairly, to treat your customers in a way that does not exploit them. And so when we look at that social sustainability, we're looking at the treatment of people, both internally and externally. And so that is the second one. And then finally, ecological sustainability is what is the business's impact on the environment? As people become more environmentally aware and have more priorities and working with businesses that are not harming the environment as much as I guess some do, the ecological sustainability really looks at the business's carbon footprint. What is its impact on the environment? And the thought behind all three of these is to be sustainable, you have to have all three. So you have to have money, you have to treat people right, and you have to be mindful of your impact on the environment. These are also called the triple bottom line. So when I started this, I said economic sustainability used to be the bottom line when I was in college. Now, as people become more aware and as people really truly value things differently, this has now been called the triple bottom line. It's not just about how much money and profit we make at the very end of our profit and loss account. Now it's how we also treat people and our impact on the environment. Another term for this could be, looking at people, planet, and profit. Profit being economic sustainability, people being social, and ecological being the planet. So an additional three Ps in a different way. And so again, for this tool, this is one of those areas where it's different from Steeple. It is not going to be focused on externalities. It is going to be focused on the business's sustainability internally on these three things. So does the business have money? Does the business treat people right? Does the business, is the bit, I should say, mindful of its economic impact or ecological impact, excuse me. So the concept here is that combining all three is very important. And so we have that economic sustainability where we focus on the money, we have the ecological, and you have the social. If you stop and think, though, there's definitely conflict between the different types of sustainability. Being more ecologically sustainable typically costs more money. And same with social sustainability. So when you're looking at these, you can see that there's conflict and some pull from certain areas that could create a conflict of interest for a business. And I will say, not every business treats these equally. And you might even think, I value some of this more than others. And so some people really value certain things. Thinking of Patagonia, for instance. Patagonia is a business that really values ecological sustainability. They will not put profit before the planet. And so when you think about that, then you think of other businesses that ecological sustainability is maybe there. It's important because they know people value it. However, they may be focusing more on their economic sustainability or their social sustainability. So it's not that these are typically given equal value for every business. Okay.
No longer can we assume the Earth's resources are limitless. We wrote this in our first catalog in 1972. Nearly 50 years later, it's only gotten worse. Today, the clothing industry contributes up to 10% of the pollution driving the climate crisis. For as long as we've been in business, we've seen quality as an environmental issue. That's why we build clothes to endure, so you don't need to buy new as often. We make gear with recycled materials. We grow food and fiber the way nature intended. We promote safe and fair labor conditions for workers. There are some things you can do too. When you want something new, ask yourself, do I really need it? Look for one product you can use in multiple ways. Repair what you wear out and pass things down. Demand recycled. Demand fair trade. Demand organic. Buy less. Demand more.
Okay, that is just an ad for Patagonia that was aired several years ago that shows you could see the three pillars within that. You could see the emphasis on where they were going, especially with the ecological and social piece. So the objective that actually goes to this is an AO3, and it asks you to examine operations management strategies and practices for ecological, social, and economic sustainability. So what you are going to do as a project about a company and about their pillars of sustainability. There will be more information to come about what is expected of you with that. You do not have anything to do with that yet. All right, so that is 5.1. These are the two objectives, and we will continue with an assessment when you return in a project-based form.